Hi everyone, this is Sinette, and in this video we're discussing an interesting relationship that can exist within ourselves, our minds, which has to do with self-honesty and blame, where interestingly enough blame becomes a form of protection and defense mechanism that we use to not have to be self-honest. And here the context of self-honesty is where we clearly, specifically, in a moment, introspect and see our responsibility within an experience that came up within ourselves, such as a reaction or a thought or an idea that from there shifted and moved us into a state. And then in that state, started speaking and behaving and acting out, where what happens oftentimes is there's like this part of us that, wants to just shut down and not face our own self-honesty of how we participated in a thought that created a reaction, that created a tonality, and that created a behavior. And so what we'll do in our minds is kind of try and deny and hide and suppress that truth, and then instead bring up a front of blame, where we start pointing fingers and saying, no, but they and them said this and that in this way and that way. And, oh, do you remember in that memory, in that moment, they did this and this and that and that, and here are all the memories, and here's the timeline, and here's the point. And so therefore, it is them and they and everyone and everything else that led to me experiencing me the way that I did. All right. So here I'm also speaking it in the tonality that this tendency or this pattern within the mind can come up, because it's kind of like what the voice sounds like as well. It's like them, they, everyone, everything else, not me. And then in the state of blame, you try and collect evidence, try and collect facts. Usually, as I've just explained, memory is most often used, where you're almost like, sitting in front of a person in like this imaginary courtroom, wanting to bring forth everything and anything possible as to why they are the guilty one, for, why you experienced yourself or reacted or, went into an emotional state and a tonality and said certain things and did certain things. Whew. Okay, everyone. So, firstly, I'd like everyone to have a look at whether this particular design exists within you on any level whatsoever, because the consequences of this is it really limits or not even limits, it completely removes your ability and capacity to be self-honest. And not only that, but also understand your own mind, your own process in a way of assisting and supporting you in real change. So therefore, with many individuals who we've walked with in relation to this particular pattern or design, we suggested is to have a look at a memory in a moment as it happened as is, because what our minds tend to do when we're in a conversation with someone and we in that moment react, based on something that they said or did, our minds immediately go to, they made me react, they said this, they did that, all right? Now, what I do when I work with memories that's assisted and supported me to circumvent that tendency to blame is I, in a moment, reflect on a memory and I have a look at, okay, what did the person say and what did they do? And then I immediately write down, okay, what came up inside myself? What were my thoughts? What were my backchats? What was my emotions that triggered in my mind in that moment? Then I immediately in myself drop the person who was in the memory. I remove them out of the equation, because my reactions within me has got to do with me, my programming, my mind. It is my responsibility. They cannot create any thought, any emotional reaction, any experience or decision or choice within me. That's my sole responsibility. So then I sit down and I have a look at understanding myself more. And through that and in that process, I take responsibility for me, and I learn so much about myself, how my mind works. And sometimes it's the most bizarre things that can come up, where a person spoke a word that triggered a memory and an experience and a feeling, and then from there I started thinking about it, and I just followed my train of thought and my emotional experiences, and then I thought and reacted myself into a state. But it had nothing to do with them personally. And sometimes, depending on my relationship with a person, I'd go to them and say, hey, you know what? I looked at this point, I opened it up for me. This was what triggered and activated inside myself. This is what I learned about myself. But, in the words and things that you were saying and speaking in this way or that way, I walked this process, I realized this and that. Then I share it with them. Not in a point of, blame or telling them you mustn't or shouldn't or be this way and that way. It's like a point of sharing, and it's fascinating when I've also done that the person then in themselves naturally take a breath, reflect, look back, and they realize, oh my goodness, I was in a state, I was in an experience. It had also nothing to do with me even personally, and then we start communicating and we realize like that whole moment had nothing to do with either one of us personally. We were going through all our personal things. So here, everyone, have a look if this method can assist and support you to really get into that point of self-honesty within you. And I mean, self-honesty is not always a nice thing, meaning that sometimes you're going to see things about yourself within you, within your mind, that you don't necessarily like looking at or don't necessarily want to admit or acknowledge. But the fact is, it exists in you. And I mean, we can't continue a relationship with ourselves and others where we keep on blaming everything and everyone for who we are, why we are, and what we experience. We will never evolve, grow, develop, excel in our living, in thought, word, and deed. So therefore, keep a lookout for whenever your thoughts and backchats go, they made me feel. It is them, blaming everything and everyone else, to have this red light bulb come up, or Christmas tree, or whichever signal of, hey, you've got to remember this, can assist and support you. And take a breath, take a step back, walk through the memory, and see if this method works for you, where you just slowly walk through the memory, see what was said, but within that, write down your personal reactions that came up. You've got to be self-honest with what was going on within yourself, and take personal responsibility to learn something about you in a way that you can understand you more, and through that understanding, change. All right, everyone. Thank you very much.